Last time we looked at Parfit's claim that survival doesn't require identity, which he offers by way of solving the paradox that arises from the imaginary case of Brown splitting into two people, the imaginary case of fission or branching. Remember, he's considering this case by way of responding to Thompson's argument against mind theory, so his claim that survival doesn't require identity is going to play a crucial role in developing his version of mind theory, which he thinks doesn't succumb to Thompson's objection. Um, now, to understand this, we need to look at Parfit's theory. So let's look at the theory. So here's pillar one of the theory, that what matters in survival, what matters as being in being the same person as in any relevant sense, is a matter of degree. So A and B, if we intuitively say I am the same person I was yesterday, thinks Parfit, we don't mean I'm literally identical with the person that was here yesterday. Instead, we mean that I am similar enough to the person who was here yesterday to count as the survivor of that person. There's a sense of survive, crucially then, that doesn't require identity. So let's consider this first pillar, that what matters in survival are relations of degree. And this isn't going to be so much as an argument for this claim. We've kind of already looked at that. Instead, this is going to be an illustration. And to illustrate this claim, we're going to look at the sort of flip side of fission. Remember, fission is when a single individual, like Brown, splits in two into red and purple. Fusion is when two distinct individuals fuse to form one individual. So here we have yellow and blue. Yellow has a series of beliefs and desires and hopes and fears and personality traits and so on, and blue does as well. Here are some of blue's. Blue strongly believes that Obama is a great leader and that Frogger is the best video game ever. Blue wants cheese and hopes to be an architect. Blue can remember dating Tom at some point in the past. Yellow has a weak belief that Obama is a terrible leader and a strong belief that Frogger is the best video game ever. Blue would like to have wine and would like to become a flutist, and Blue can remember dating Jerry at some point in the past. Now, what do we do when we fuse these individuals to form a single new individual, Green? Well, we're going to take the beliefs and desires and hopes and fears and personality traits and so on and so forth and try and make them come out consistent. How do we do that? Well, while Blue strongly believed that Obama is great, Yellow weakly believed that Obama is terrible. So the belief that Obama is great, or at least good, will win out. They both strongly believe that Frogger is the best video game, so that can stay. One wants wine, the other one wants cheese. Well, those are compatible desires. You can have them both, so they both get to stay. One wants to become an architect, one wants to become a flutist. It's hard to be a professional architect and a professional flutist, so we're going to just pick one of those. And they can remember dating distinct individuals. Those can both stay so long as the times don't overlap in the wrong way. So you sort of get the psychology to come out consistent by picking bits and pieces from each of them and stick that all into Green. And that's fusion. Now, here's a question. Do blue and yellow each survive in Green? And what Parfit says is, although some psychological characteristics change between blue and green, as well as between yellow and green, there are many that persist. Like blue, Green believes Obama is a great leader. Like yellow, Green believes that Frogger is the best video game ever and wants to have wine. There's similarities between blue and green and similarities between yellow and green. And, says Parfit, that's just like ordinary life. Think about your own life. Maybe early in the term, I mentioned this example before, you wanted to be an engineer, and now you've switched and you want to be a theater performer. Well, that's a change in desire. We wouldn't say that's death. We wouldn't say you died because it was necessary for being you that you wanted to be an engineer. Changing your career path isn't suicide. It's just a change. It's still you. It's just that you want something different. So we shouldn't say, says Parfit, that blue is dead because some of green's personality traits or beliefs or desires or hopes or fears are not the same as the ones blue had. And we shouldn't say that yellow is dead because some of green's psychology is not the same as what yellow had. Second, says Parfit, many people welcome treatment with the effects that happen when blue becomes green and yellow becomes green. And surely they're not welcoming death. here's Parfit's idea, and I mentioned this example before in an earlier part of this slideshow, in an earlier segment. Imagine that you go to the doctor because you have a phobia of snakes. My wife has a phobia of snakes. Imagine she goes and she gets treatment. Well, something that's a psychological disposition in my wife would be gone. Does that mean she's dead? Is getting treatment for the phobia suicide? No. Why not? Because you can change bits of your psychology and still be you. Third thing to notice, blue and yellow can each have intentional control over green's life. So why does this matter? Well, you might say, look, blue can't be the same person as green because in order for two people to be the same person, or just let's talk about being the survivor of, because that's now what we mean when we say the same person. In order for green to be the survivor of blue, it must be the case that blue has some kind of control over green. Part of what it is for me to be the same person I was at the beginning of the semester is for the person at the beginning of the semester to have some sort of control over me. That is, to contribute to what I do. And you might think that doesn't happen here because yellow gets in there and interferes with blue controlling green. But, says Parfit, look, a married couple, each individual has control over what the sort of couple does. Similarly, both blue and yellow can have control over what green does. It's not complete and total control, but then it isn't even in the ordinary case. Now, says Parfit, this isn't to say that blue totally survives in green or that yellow totally survives. Rather, it's to say that survival isn't all or none. Blue partly survives as green, and yellow partly survives as green. Each survives to some degree. And now what Parfit wants you to notice, this is where you need to, when you're thinking about this case, you might say, yeah, that's plausible. But here's what Parfit wants you to notice. The same is true for you. If you've drastically changed your mind about various things since the beginning of the term, maybe you were an atheist and now you're, an adherent of Islam. Maybe you wanted to be a pianist and now you want to be an engineer. You've gone through all sorts of drastic changes. Well, says Parfit, you still survive to some degree, but you survive less fully than you would if you hadn't gone through those changes. So it's not just about blue and yellow becoming green, it's about all of us every day. Every change we go through reduces the degree to which we survive. Okay. Next up is this claim, that there's a sense of survive that doesn't imply identity. So we can legitimately talk about being the survivor of, and in some loose sense, being the same person as, even if we're jettisoning talk of identity. So there's two ways we can think of this. We can think of survival as connection, or we can think of survival as continuity. We've primarily been talking about survival as continuity, but Parfit actually prefers to talk about connectedness. So what's the difference? Well, here you have a series of individuals. And these individuals, we can say, are color connected. Color continuous, but not color connected. Why are they color continuous? Because, let me see if I can get the cursor here. When you move from 1 to 2, there's similarity. And then you move from 2 to 3, there's similarity. And you move from 3 to 4, there's similarity, and so on and so forth. But 7 and 1, let's say, no longer have any colors in common. So 7 and 1 aren't actually color connected anymore. But they are continuous. Why are they continuous? Because we got from 1 to 7 by going through a series of small gradual transformations. Now, I want you to imagine a psychological analog where, from 1 to 2, you give up on your desire to be an engineer. From 2 to 3, you give up on your religion. From 3 to 4, you give up on your alcoholism. From 4 to 5, you give up on your intense anxiety. From 5 to 6, you give up on something else, and from 6 to 7, you give up on something else, such that by the time you get from 1 to 7, there's no common psychological traits between 1 and 7. But it was a series of small steps with each pair overlapping to some degree that got you from 1 to 7. Then we would say 1 and 7 are psychologically continuous, but not psychologically connected. Now, says Parfit, you're continuous with any descendant, even if that descendant shares none of your memories or attitudes, and thus continuity is transitive. So if 1 is continuous with 2 and 2 is continuous with 3, then 1 is continuous with 3. If 3 is continuous with 4, and 4 is continuous with 5, 5 continuous with 6, 6 continuous with 7, then 3 and 7 is continuous with 3. So continuity is transitive. You aren't necessarily connected with any descendant. Connection requires some sufficient overlap in memory and attitude, and thus is intransitive. So even though 1 and 7 are continuous, because 1 is continuous with 2, which is continuous with 3, and so on, 1 and 7 aren't connected because they actually have no colors in common. And the same would go for two individuals who have no psychological features in common. Since connectedness has degrees, survival is a matter of degree. Parfit also suggests that we leave which features are salient for connection to the choice of the speaker, and that we allow these to vary from context to context. Now, this is a really important point, and we've gone through quite a bit, so I think I'm going to stop there, and we'll continue next time by talking about this point that what features are salient will be up to the speaker.